Welcome back to the C.T.W. podcast. I am your host, Duranquez Wynn, and thank you for tuning in again. As you guys can see, I am in a different location. I have a mic now. After watching, which I want to thank everybody who watched the first video and liked, commented, and subscribed and reposted. I appreciate all you guys and continue to do so. After watching the first video, the audio was a little echoey, so I decided to invest in a mic. But today, in this episode, or something that I felt that I needed to talk about was grace and forgiveness, but mainly grace. Because sometimes I think in life, life beats you up so much, whether it's at your job or whether it's just everyday life or whether it's whoever, regardless of what you've been through or just the amount of responsibilities that you have on your back and all the people depending on you, if you have people depending on you, from your wife or husband to your kids to someone that you may have adopted or someone that you decided to take in because you didn't want them to stay in their situation, or just you putting a lot of pressure on yourself in general just to be the best that you can be in life. But yeah, I wanted to talk about grace because I think sometimes people don't give themselves enough grace for this life that we are in. One thing that I can say from personal experience is that sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you can't see the positive. Sometimes you can't see past all the things that you've done wrong. Sometimes you can't see past everything that you know you should have done, but you didn't do. Sometimes it's hard to see past that. And I would just like to submit to anyone who's watching this or anyone who is struggling with forgiving themselves or extending grace to themselves, is that there's grace for that. Whatever the situation or circumstance may be, whatever you have done, whatever you've been through, whatever someone has done to you, there's grace for it. God has given us all grace for each and every situation that we have been through, everything that we've did, there's grace for it. And until you believe that he has given us grace, he has forgiven you, until you start treating yourself with grace, then you're always going to be stuck in a cycle. You're always going to feel like you're not good enough. You're always going to feel like that you didn't do good enough, when that's not always the case. I think one of the biggest things that happens to us a lot of time is because you have people that are perfectionists, and then you have people that don't put everything put all their eggs in one basket because they've been hurt before. Or you have people and then you have some people that go all out. You have people that go all out and it doesn't work, and then you have people that continually go all out. But from my experience and the people that I've encountered in my life, I mean, we all at some point in time in life deal with being hard on ourselves, not giving ourselves enough grace, not being patient enough with ourselves, not being forgiving because we didn't do something or we did something we know we shouldn't do. Sometimes we don't extend enough forgiveness or enough grace. And I would like to submit that there's grace for it. Regardless of the situation and circumstance, there's grace for it. And the sooner that you understand that grace that God has given us is the same grace that you need to extend to yourself, you will be able to get out of that cycle. You'll be able to get out of that frame of mind. You'll be able to progress forward. You'll be able to get over the hump, regardless of what it is. I know people tell you, hey, I thought you're smarter than this. I thought you would have been here by now. Hey, you're better than this. Why are you doing these things? Or not even people. It could be yourself. You could have such a high expectation for yourself that could be unrealistic, but we'll talk about that later. Such a high expectation for yourself that you think you shouldn't mess up, that you think you should be further along, that you think you shouldn't have done what you did. And I would like to submit to anyone watching this that that's not true. And even if that is true, you are where you are now. And so how long are you going to let that situation or those circumstances prevent you from getting to the next step, next phase, or become the next best version of yourself in God that you're supposed to be. I know a lot of times that you go through certain situations and circumstances, we tend to harp on it. We tend to sit there and say, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have done this, but you've already done it. So instead of sitting there and beating yourself up, and the thing about it is that life already comes with unforeseen circumstances and situations that's gonna beat you up anyway. And the thing about life is that life is gonna beat you up without you having to ask, regardless of what it is. Kids out of nowhere, extra responsibilities, having to take care of a loved one, car breaking down, lack of money, mental health issues, regardless of what the situation or circumstance is, life by itself is already going to add and already going to place things on you that you didn't even ask for. And so you have to deal with the stressors of life plus the stressors that you're putting on yourself. And the longer that you continue to sit there and play victim or be in a pity party or continue to blame everyone else for the reason that you're not where you are, instead of taking responsibility for it and extending grace to yourself, but it will continue to be harder for you to get over the hump. It will continue to be harder for you to progress. It will continue to be harder for you to start viewing yourself how God views you. It will continue to be hard as long as you view yourself as not good enough, not worthy, not well enough, regardless of the situation or circumstance. All the time, you don't have to be perfect in order to be worthy. If that was the case, all of us would be dead. God would not have continued to keep us on this earth if we were going to be perfect. But instead, what he ended up doing is what he ended up doing was, he said, I'm going to send my only begotten son because I know there are going to be some people down here that are not perfect, but they're still worth it to me. And when you start viewing yourself how God views you, regardless of what you've been through, regardless of the situation or circumstance, regardless of your past life, regardless of anything, you will be able to move forward. Now, in that situation or in those things, just because you've forgiven yourself does not mean life will. It does not mean people will allow you to forget and transition into the new you. And that's something that I would submit, or that's something that I would say, is that you have to be stronger than those people. You have to be stronger than what they say to you. You have to be stronger than their beliefs. Your beliefs have to be stronger than their beliefs. They may believe you're still the same person, but you have to know in your heart of hearts that you're not. You have to know that you have transitioned for the better. You have to know that you are now extending grace. You have forgiven yourself for what you've done out of lack of knowledge, or just anger, or bitterness, or just a lack of experience. You can't really fault yourself for a lack of experience. You can't fault your parents for a lack of experience. You can't fault the people that raised you or the people that you allowed in your life for their lack of experiences. We all have things we need to work on. We all have things. We all have our traumas, our PTSDs, and we all have our things that we need to heal from. And we cannot hold someone so dearly and so tightly because we're all human. We all have our discrepancies. We all have our things that we need to get better in. And that's one thing I would like to submit, is that regardless of your situation or circumstance, there's grace for it. Regardless if you used to run around with a gang, or regardless if now you used to run with a gang and now you're changing your life and now you've gotten a job and you decided you wanted to work your way up and start your own business. You cannot let people say, oh, he used to be the one that did this, now you're doing this. That's perfectly okay, but you should transition after a certain point. Life by itself, people by itself, situations by itself will continue to hold you down. They will not, depending on who you are and where you've been, if not everybody, they will not allow you to grow. And you have to push past it. And one thing that I will submit is that you cannot allow those situations and circumstances and those things that you hear to keep you from progressing forward. If you used to hang with a group of guys or a group of girls that you guys used to party all night and do all these things, and you decided that you wanted to mature and grow and go in a different direction, don't allow them to pull you backwards. Don't allow them, regardless of what they say to you, regardless of how they feel about you, regardless of any of that, don't allow them to pull you backwards. There's grace for it. God has extended grace unto us, regardless of the situation or circumstance. And the thing about it is that when life comes, we forget that we were giving unmerited grace, love, and favor from God. And a lot of times we can't even wrap our head around, why does he love me? Why does God continue to give me grace? Well, I don't feel his grace in this moment. And I want to submit to anybody who's watching this is that do not compare life's grace to God's grace. That is unmatched. The grace of God and the grace that life will give you is completely unmatched. Life does not care whether or not you have a job or whether or not you're doing your best, whether or not you've been sacrificing for months and years to do better, or life does not care about that. But God does. He sees what you've been doing. He sees the little movements and the little increments that you've been making to adjust your life to be better. You don't have to start big. You don't have to pay attention to somebody else's progress. God will meet you right where you are, regardless of the situation or circumstance. And I think a lot of times what happens is that we will get caught up with life because of this new technology, and because of how technology is not a bad thing. I think technology used the right way is very beneficial. But I think how technology is used and how it has manipulated people's mind to think that life should be a certain way by a certain age, I think that allows people, and it has prevented people from extending grace to themselves. Now, instead of it being a highlight reel to allow people to see what progress and what work that you have done, it is now saying, if I have not gotten this house, this car, if I'm not married, or if I don't have a certain thing by this age, I'm not good enough. If I don't have this amount of money in my bank account, just like X, Y, and Z, I'm not working hard enough. And I want to say, and me personally, I would like to say that's not true. We're all in different stages and ages of our life, regardless if you're 30, regardless if you're 15, regardless of the age, 60, regardless of where you are, we are all works in progress with God. And if you do not learn how to extend grace to yourself, regardless of where you are going to be stuck in the same cycle over and over and over again. And you're going to wake up one day and you're going to be mad, or you're going to be miserable, or you're going to have a lot of regrets or anger or bitterness because you never were able to give yourself grace from a previous situation so that you can move forward. And like I said, I would like to submit whatever that situation may be, whatever is keeping you in the same place, whatever is keeping you stagnant, whatever is keeping you in the same mind state, whatever is keeping you in the same heart posture, whatever actions are keeping you from progressing to that next level in your life, I would submit that God has presented grace for that, whatever it may be. Now, I do want to say that you may need help, but it's up to you whether or not you allow him to help you. Yes, he has given all of us grace. Yes, he has given all of us a choice. But what we do with that choice will determine what he does for us. We all have an opportunity. We all have equal amount of time in the day to where we can ask God to come in and help us with certain situations and circumstances. But instead, we take them and we medicate ourselves with the things of the world. We'll go and we'll get on social media for X amount of hours. We'll go to work for X amount of hours. We'll go and we'll drive around. We'll go out to eat with friends. We'll go spend X amount of time with family. We'll do everything other than invite God in to help us with this situation that we have been struggling with for X amount of months, days, years. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with social media. There's nothing wrong with spending time with your family. There's nothing wrong with going and hang with friends. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. The thing about it is that when you have something that you're continually going through the same cycle of, but you're putting it on the back burner, thinking that you'll have time to get it situated, that's when you start to become resentful. That's when you start to get aggravated on why can I not help? Why can I not get over the hump? And like I said in my last video, you won't be able to do it by yourself. You won't be able to give yourself the amount of grace that God has given us without Him. That is impossible to do because you don't know how to do it. And if you don't know how to do it, you can't give yourself something you don't know how to do. You can't give yourself something you have not been exposed to. And that's something that I would like to submit, that regardless of how hard you try, regardless of how much work you do, regardless of what types of self-help books you read, regardless of anything, you will not be able to give yourself the unmerited, undeserved favor, grace, and love of God until you invite Him in. It's not going to happen, regardless of where you are, regardless of if you're married, regardless if you're dating, regardless if you're at work, regardless if with a stranger, just wanting to develop better character skills in life in general. Until you have invited God in to become a better version and to show you what His grace is, not the world's grace, because the world's grace would say, oh, that's good enough. As long as you didn't kill a man, or as long as you didn't slap somebody, or as long as you bit your tongue, or as long as you didn't X, Y, and Z, that's good enough. But I would like to submit to you, that's good enough for the world, but that's not good enough for God. God wants to give you a level of grace that literally allows you to not even think in that direction. I never said it wasn't going to arise, just not even go in that direction. You will have times where that flesh wants to rise in you and you want to react and you want to retaliate, but because of the grace that God showed you and the grace that God has given you, once you learn that type of grace for Him, you will see no point in even doing those things anymore. You would be like, man, it ain't no point in me reacting this way because God gave me grace when I was acting foolish. God gave me grace when I was out here doing what I wasn't supposed to do. God gave me grace when I did what I did or said what I said what I said to my parents, or gave me grace when I robbed, or whatever the situation may be. God gave me grace. And so when He gives you grace, it is only right that you extend grace out to others that have not received the grace, His grace as well. And I know a lot of times people have the pride or have the mindset of, I'm not going to let anybody get over on me. And I would like to submit, that's not them getting over on you. That is a lie of the enemy to say that people are trying to get over on you. And I would like to submit is that if you have the mindset that people are trying to get over on you, the enemy will always be able to use that against you. Whatever you do not confront or whatever you do not bring to God, the enemy will always use to make sure he keeps you in bondage. Regardless of whatever the situation may be, regardless of how you may feel about it, anything. So if a situation that has happened in your home when you were younger that you felt that you should have gotten grace for being young because of your lack of wisdom and understanding, it may be hard for you to extend grace in the world. It may be hard for you to extend grace to others because someone that you loved did not give you grace when you needed grace. And like I said in my first video, He is far beyond humans' grace. He is far beyond your parents' grace. He is far beyond your boyfriend's grace, your husband's grace. He is far beyond your child's grace. There is no human on the face of this earth that will be able to extend grace towards you like God will. But the thing about it is that you have to invite Him in. You have to ask Him to show you His grace. Because right now, a lot of people, or I feel that a lot of people are extending grace the world's way. And while that still may be good character, that still may not be you lashing out, that still may not be you retaliating out of anger, that still is not God's grace. And like I said, this may not be for everybody. This may be for a specific person who needs to hear it. But even then, there are situations and circumstances in life where until you extend grace to yourself, you won't be able to go to the next level. You won't be able to get over that hump. You won't be able to get to the next place in your marriage or your relationship. You won't be able to step over you being a manager to the owner. There are certain things that God won't take you into because you don't have certain characteristic traits for. And in order for you to get them, you have to ask him for them. I don't even have the answers to that, but he does. And like I said in the first video, I don't have all the answers, but I'm connected to the one who has the answers. And anytime I need an answer, I go to him. And so what I am suggesting to people, or suggesting to whoever's watching this, is talk to him. If you have a hard time with extending grace to others, extending grace to yourself, go talk to God. Ask him. And if anyone has a hard time believing that he'll say anything to you, he'll respond, or sometimes you feel like God isn't even listening, I would beg to differ, because I have Bible for that. James 1:5. It says, if any of you lacks wisdom to guide him through a decision or circumstance, he is to ask our benevolent Father, God, who gives to everyone generously and without rebuke or blame, and it will be given to him. This is verse 6 that most people struggle with. It says, but he must ask for wisdom in faith without doubting God's willingness to help. For the one who doubts is like a billowing surge of the sea that is blown about and tossed by the wind. Such a person, this is verse 7, such a person ought not to think or expect that he will receive anything at all from the Lord. And so that is for anyone that feels like every time you try to go talk to God, or every time you have a personal issue come up, or anytime that you feel that you have literally said, God, this is my last straw. God, I can't take this anymore. Or God, I really need your help. Or God, I've been asking you to do X, Y, and Z, but I haven't seen you come through. I want to add that, one, you're looking for him how you expected him, or you're looking for him how you want him to show up. God is not confined to us. He does things for himself. So he could have already shown up, but you're looking for him in a certain way when he's like, hey, I've already shown up. 2, you ask him for stuff, but then because you don't fight long enough, or you don't look long enough, you don't even believe he's listening now. You don't even believe he's going to show up. Or because you're in a situation that you could get yourself out of, or because you're in a situation where it requires your strength, it requires your willpower, it requires you to do some work, you feel like he hasn't come through for you. And like I said, it's your decision, it's your choice. But I know from experience that all you have to do is ask, regardless of what it is. God said, ask anything in accordance to my will, and it shall be given unto you, regardless of what it is. And so a lot of times we as people will get so frustrated with him, and we'll ask him for something, and then we feel like he didn't come through. That's not always true. But yeah, here we go. Mark 11:24. It says, for this reason I am telling you, whatever things you ask for in prayer, in accordance with God's will, believe with confident trust that you have received them, and they will be given to you. Now, I am going to add this because verse 25, because a lot of people miss this. It says, whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him. Drop the issue, let it go, so that your Father who is in heaven will also forgive you your transgressions and wrongdoings against him and others. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive you your transgressions. So not to get off topic, but sometimes we can ask God for stuff, but we ask with the wrong heart. hey God, please give me grace, but you really don't want to give grace. You're just asking because you know it's the wrong thing to do. And that will be a completely different podcast down the road. But yeah, there's grace for that. Whatever the situation, circumstance, whatever you've done, whatever you haven't done, whatever you should have done, there's grace for it, regardless of what it is. We're human. God understands that we are human. So do not punish people for when their humanity shows up. Because that the world already does it. If you miss a certain amount of time at a job, they fire you. If you don't produce every single day, day in and day out, they fire you. Regardless of where you are, life already by itself adds enough to people. Adds enough to us as people. So I would extend to whoever's watching this is give grace to yourself, to others. And if you don't know how to do it, ask God for it. He'll give it to you. He will give you whatever you ask for, like in Mark 11:24. Whatever it is, he'll ask for, like James 1:5. But you need to expect that he'll do it for you. Extend grace. There's grace for it, regardless of what the situation may be. But yeah, I felt like that's what needed to be talked about. And I appreciate everybody for watching. I appreciate everybody for the first video. But I am your host, Deron Quiz Win, and I am out.